Let's take a moment now to talk about cloud consumption from a different perspective. Here we're going to discuss the Opex and Capex models. And before we get deep into those, let's talk about economies of scale. Economies of scale is the ability to do things more efficiently or at a lower cost per unit when operating at a larger scale. And this is one of the key things that cloud allows. Here are the benefits. Cloud providers can pass on economies of scale to consumers. Well, how do they do that? Well, they acquire hardware at lower costs, and they can create local government deals as well. Perhaps they get incentives from federal or state deals to basically give them better power and cooling costs, or incentives to build data centers in those areas. And this happens across the world. Data center efficiencies are another way. They're just really, really good at it. So their scale, they're able to pass on those benefits. Instead of everybody having to build a team that's really good at managing data center, Microsoft Azure can do that for you. Well, that leads us to comparing CapEx versus OpEx. Capital expenditure, this is the upfront spending of money on physical infrastructure, and costs from CapEx have a value that reduces over time. Think of this as when you buy those servers. You purchase them, you can depreciate them over time, but it's a big upfront expense. Operational expenditure, in contrast, is spending on products and services as needed. It's an operational expense to your business. You're paying as you go, and you get billed immediately as you consume those services. So these are the two different models that the enterprises ultimately have to compare and contrast. There's different financial rules around depending on the business and how they want to operate as well. But essentially, CapEx is a bigger outlay. Operational expense is a recurring outlay, and there's pros and cons to both of those. Keep all of this in context, though, with the consumption-based model. Cloud service providers operate on a consumption-based model. So Microsoft Azure operates on this model, which means that end users only pay for the resources that they use. Whatever they use is what they pay for. Well, billing is based on actual usage. So we're metering the services they use and charging the customer for those. Prices for individual resources and services are provided. They're available in a public pricing calculator, and you have better cost prediction with this consumption-based model as a whole. Well, how does that fit in then to CapEx versus OpEx? Well, CapEx, again, is spending on infrastructure that is completed upfront. Cost is written off over a period of time. And operational expenditure, no upfront cost, pay for the service as you consume it. Deduct from your tax bill in the same year as expense occurs, in contrast to CapEx, which can be depreciated over time, often over 5 years. Typical on-premises CapEx costs include the server costs, backup and archive costs, storage costs, data center costs, and network costs. So think of those for the moment. Those are things that we would typically buy on premises and would be capital expenses. Typical OpEx costs, in contrast, for cloud computing are server lease costs, software and feature leases, usage demand, cost scaling. So a little bit different. It's all about per service. Hey, I'm using the server for a period of time. Great. I've used that. Where's my bill? Great. That's an operational expense. Comparing and contrasting the benefits: CapEx benefits, predictability, cost effective when you can consume the infrastructure quickly. So don't minimize the benefits of CapEx. When you want to build a data center and you know you can consume all that infrastructure quickly, perhaps outlaying those capital costs can have the benefits you need. OpEx benefits are try and buy, low initial costs, demand fluctuation. You can scale as you need to. So lots of benefits on both sides there. The key, though, again, when you're thinking of this in the context of Azure, is the consumption model. Back to the meter we had earlier, it's try and buy, pay for what you use. Each service has a cost associated with it. You could go to that Azure pricing calculator, look at your costs, and that's what you're going to pay for your services.